Hey everybody, we're here to discuss three more chapters of Joe Brewer's The Design Pathway for Regenerating Earth. And we're starting with chapter 10, 10, 11, and 12. We'll spend about 20 minutes on each of them. And chapter 10 is introducing the idea of pro-social behavior. And we get into Eleanor Ostrom and David Sloan Wilson and Peter Turchin. The core design, I'm looking at page 84 in the book, if you've got the book handy to you. And he describes a couple of eight core design principles of pro-social behavior: the shared identity of purpose, equitable distribution of contributions and benefits. Number 3, fair and inclusive decision making. Number 4, monitoring behavior. Number 5, graduated response to helpful and unhelpful behavior as you've been monitoring it. Number 6, fast and fair conflict resolution. Number 7, authority to self-govern, the ability to do that. And number 8, collaborative relations with other groups. And so the discussion questions for this chapter, they start on page 88. The first one, discussion question number 1, have you ever been part of a team that worked really well? What did it feel like? Was the team successful at achieving its purpose? The second discussion question, do you feel prepared and capable of forming effective groups? And if not, where might you get training so that you can practice? And then the last discussion question for this chapter, how can you become more pro-social in your life? What does it mean to even do this? And will others be able to take advantage of you more easily if you do? So that's a little overview of this chapter. Let's jump into these discussion questions.
I guess I'll see what I can do to start us off here. Briefly addressing each one, I think. Have you ever been part of a team that worked really well? Maybe a couple times, and just some quick thoughts on that. Uh, Smaller teams and more higher trust. Those teams, or like for example, if there were people I'd known for a long time, we had kind of this automatic, we could almost like read each other minds kind of thing, and we understood why people did certain things, so there's a lot of inherent trust built up already. um, just a little bit on that one. Do you feel prepared and capable of forming effective groups? I feel I certainly don't feel like an expert about it, but I feel like I'm um, capable of starting down that road and fumbling through and getting it figured out. I feel comfortable at that level. Um, and how can you become more pro-social in your life? What does it mean? Will others be able to take advantage? Um, I don't know. That just kind of feels like a general. Some of these, it's felt like just kind of what I've discovered, just existing and interacting with other people over my lifetime. But it's nice to know that like there's very um, I don't know what the word is I'm looking for. Like there's a more formalized processes for these things that I can kind of take a look at, like pro-social, and there's other governance models like sociocracy and such. It certainly interested in learning more about. And then I like the question at the end: will others be able to take advantage of you more easily? And I don't think pro-social is about just accommodating everybody. And this is one of the kind of the core things I've been trying to practice and get better at myself is I've tended to be kind of a people pleaser. over my life, but it's the balance of having empathy and compassion for somebody and also holding your own boundaries and your own values and walking that line down the middle between those. Both are necessary. So yeah, it's not about allowing people to take advantage of you. It's about that walking that balance between those things. Um, yeah, I'll stop there. Thanks.
Thank you.
I've been part of successful teams, and I think Dave kind of pointed towards this already. It's just really the need for excellent communication, both listening and um, being able to share stories effectively, um, and you know, not so great teams, and I think that that idea of setting boundaries, it's very tricky for me. I'm not good at that. That's something I need to work on. Um, uh, I think that something that is really a key is that there's effective listening, um, and not just the everybody battling to get their point across. that that that's when things go south, I think.
Yeah, wanting to dominate or
Yeah.
control the discourse or the project or
Mm.
oh, Bryce, you're muted.
I'm kind of holding off until the last because I'll probably talk longer.
Bubakar?
Yeah, I'm here, but I don't got the book. I don't understand too much
Um,
things on it because it's my first time to be here. Wanna listen and take more knowledge on it before to interact.
Great. I'm glad you're here and glad you're listening in. And feel free if you have any questions or want to jump in. But I appreciate that you're here to listen in.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you
I'm
for
very
joining us.
happy to be with you here and to learn with you and to know more things on how to regenerate to F. So happy.
Okay, I guess I'll go then. I was fortunate enough that in my workplace from the 1980s on to be part of different teams on each of the jobs that I was on, and the engineering staff. We were the guys who were on the floor, but I was just one of the grunts on the floor. The engineering staff would convene meetings, and we would give them our feedback and suggestions, and sometimes we were listened to, and sometimes we weren't. And engineers are for the most part relatively clueless. I tell it to my brother-in-law all the time. He's an engineer and he agrees with me. But we got through it, and we all functioned as a team that ways for years. This was at PPG Industries. I worked there for 31 years. Uh, before retiring, I got involved again in um, politics. We joined the Green Party of the state of Wisconsin, and my wife and I were both on the state committee. So we had to learn all these consensual decision-making things and uh, mediation procedures and stuff like that that they use to resolve conflict. And I ended up progressing up to being on the national committee. So I saw a lot of conflict there with people that just did not want to get along with anybody. So I would kind of step in and try to go and see what I could do to defuse situations, and it worked out pretty good. Um, but then I was in transition towns towards the end of that, concurrent with the Green Party work up until 2012. And in transition towns, we had a governing board of volunteers who kind of oversaw things and steered things. We're called the steering committee. And then we had working groups. There was just two working groups. There was the Victory Guard Initiative, and then there was the Water Working Group. I was in a water working group. It arose out of the heavy rains and floods of 2010, and where we would do then water remediation, rainwater collection remediation efforts uh, in like rain barrels, IBC totes, and stuff like that, that we would set up at different places, schools, churches, and such, and individual homes. Well, the guy who had set himself up to be like main spokesperson for that group was having an issue with the steering committee over how things were done. He had all of us on the water committee all tied up in knots on decision making because we thought the steering committee wasn't backing us on anything. Well, the steering committee couldn't because it wasn't part of their function. And they were trying to explain it to him, and all he would do is just get mad and then rail at us about it. And then finally, the whole thing ended up in mediation, which was, very interesting. Going through this mediation and doing the whole thing, I tried to keep a level head and everything else, and just saying, I don't understand what the issues are going on here, but let's try to sit down and see what we can figure out. Well, it turned out that this particular guy, we'll just call him Chris, basically wanted to be in charge of everything. And he just, I left that group in 2012, and then it transitioned over to its next phase, which was a business called Reflow, as engineering students from Milwaukee School of Engineering stepped forward and took over the design and implementation of the rainwater collection apparatus. And a couple of the people from the group stayed with it doing that transition. Um, Barb, I forget her last name now, but she was a retired Montessori teacher from Milwaukee, Barbara Richards. And so Barbara stayed and guided them through their adjustment on that. And, that's my experience with these things. It's like, yes, you can function well, provided that everybody understands how the system works, who has responsibility for different portions of it. And then when I organized permaculture courses that I was teaching, I tried to make them as self-governing as possible, with the choices being made by the students as to the venue, the cost, the food, how they wanted to structure everything. And I just provided the curriculum and taught it. And I let them run everything else because I thought this is how you teach responsibility. It's how you teach community. It's how you bring these people together, is by letting them become a community and just kind of sit back and maybe give advice if asked. That's all I got.
Great, thank you. And Bubakar, I don't know if you have a chance to look in the chat, but Joan found a copy of a way to read the book online, the Joe Brewer's Pathway to Regenerate, Pathway to Regenerate the Earth. So if you get a chance to look at that link or read that on a device that you can, a laptop or whatever device you might have.
And I just wanted to give a plug on Andra Bludovin. I'm sure I've butchered her last name. Did a couple of sort of a mini overview of sociocracy, and then a 6-week version. And I think she's going to be teaching another one in August. I'm not sure. But really, the sessions were recorded, and so I think really she's an excellent instructor. And a lot of what you said, Bryce, sort of resonates with how Andra, she modeled sociocracy and how she ran the course and gave, a little bit of practice. It ends up being, very tight for time to cover all the concepts, and then I'll let people practice things. But it was really well done. And I think there's another pro-social in the self-learning section of the design school as well.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. And so there is a section in the design school. I think it's called governance.
Collaborative governance. Sorry, I forgot to mention that.
Yeah. Thank you. Collaborative governance, and as Joan's saying, there's recordings of that class, and Andra will be offering that class again in I think I did hear them say in August later this summer. So and I thought that was a really worthwhile um, class as well. Okay. Um, so some of us are a little bit familiar with the sociocracy and have talked about it in other contexts, but I think this chapter might have been the first place that I encountered it, and now we see it in these other contexts, and I've spent a little more time digging into Eleanor Ostrom and those 8 principles, and like thinking about how am I organizing bioregionally here. Last year I had a group of people that were planning an immersion, and we actually got to a point where like there was sort of a violation of the agreements of the sociocracy, and I like pulled out the 8 agreements. I'm like, hey, let's be the kind of group that uses this as a tool to make sure that we have good communication, and we're planning together. So I've tried to implement it into this bioregional organizing, and I know a couple of us were on a call earlier today about how do we how do we do these hubs, or how do we do this digitally, and how do we do it in person, and we're going to meet at the library. No, we're not going to meet at the library because the wind is shutting down electricity in half of the city, and kind of flowing with the energy that is presenting itself is kind of is part of that story too. But maybe we can transition to the next chapter, which is about grief and trauma. On page 91, dealing with grief and trauma. And in this chapter, Joe Brewer goes into that the part of kind of the regeneration that is about our own feelings, and when you feel pain and you feel loss and you're grieving lost possibilities, that is part of loving, and part of the regenerative process, part of what motivates us to do things about the things that we care about, and there are 3 discussion questions for this chapter as well that begin on page 95. And the first question is about have you experienced loss? Hold in your heart the love and pain you feel as you remember it. What does this evoke from deep within you? The second question, do you have social support to hold your grief as you heal through your traumas? And the third question, how can you work with your pain to feel more love again? Which practices will help you become more attuned to your ability to care for the world around you?
Okay, I'm going to get this out of the way now. Yeah. 6 years ago, at the beginning of the pandemic, my wife came down sick and died. She was sick for 6 weeks, and so she died about a week after they started locking down hospitals. So that was the last couple of days of March. We've been together for 50 years, starting a date in high school. So we were like 3 days short of the 50th anniversary of our first date. And that next couple of years was pretty rough. We couldn't have everybody come together for the funeral because, of course, there was pretty much a social ban on travel and group get together. So we waited until 2021 to have a ceremony, which we did at the Bridges Center, and we interred her ashes at that time. And then everybody went back to their respective portions of the country. And then on her way home, my daughter decided that she was going to get all of her stuff and move back home. So she was in Arizona. She rented a truck, loaded all of her possessions up, and came along with my teenage grandson, and they moved back in for 1 year until he graduated from high school. And she worked remotely from home, because she was already doing that out in Phoenix. So that was a great help for me, um, her being around emotionally, and it kind of like distracted me from other things, and we could talk about stuff as well. Um, and as far as being adjusting to that later on, gradually you get accustomed to it all. And if it wasn't for permaculture, I probably would have gone nuts because it helps me to lose myself in the design work and in just kind of looking at the earth through that lens of participation with other species and such, and just all the people that I've met um, over the last 6 years that I hadn't met before that, and ones that I renewed friendships with also through permaculture. It's been a blessing. That's it.
Thank you, Bryce.
This topic just obviously hits very close to the heart, and I thank you for sharing that story, Bryce. Um, uh, I've lost both my parents, although it's not recent. My mom passed just in March. It was 10 years since she passed, and my dad passed in 1999. I'm an only child, so that made those losses very difficult because my network is very small for close family, and but I will say that my husband was a lifeline, just the way your daughter was, Bryce. And then when my mom passed, I'd had both our children. When my dad passed, I was still pregnant with my first son, but having my boys to look after and all of the work involved and so on helps. And part of me, I gotta say, like, for my parents to have been here for things like the pandemic and the political upheaval that's going on now, I feel like, yeah, I think maybe they're okay that they weren't here for all of this. But on a more positive note, there have been resources in the design school, like recordings by Frances Weller, who's a grief expert, have been very terrific resources for me, and being in sessions with Ann Billen and Neil Davison, who also I don't know how to describe that. They're very much intertwined with collapse acceptance and now what, and that involves experiencing grief and dealing with trauma and healing from trauma. So there's been a lot of resources, and also Joanna Macy's Active Hope work has also been a rich source of just new ways to think about grief. Because for me, it was actually Anne made the point that, and I hadn't really thought of it until then, she pointed it out, was that grief and love are sisters, and that that it's really part and parcel of love that there will be grief. So yeah, it's not an easy thing. We're seeing collapse and losing things around us. So there's other kinds of grief happening besides personal loss of others in our lives. But it's important to not just dismiss or minimize it. That's for sure.
Thank you, Joan. One of the things that I say about Bog Witch is my storytelling character is that bogs, these certain kind of wetlands that have this acidic water. If a body is in a bog, it doesn't break down. It doesn't decompose the way bodies normally decompose, and so they have found like mummies basically in the bog bodies that are that look like living beings that are they have their eyelashes and everything. Uh, they are unprocessed bodies, and I think of this extended metaphor of kind of unprocessed trauma or unprocessed feelings that are bubbling up in the bog bodies are coming to the surface, and that for some reason the bog witch makes it, the conditions for people to feel safe to feel their feelings and to start unpacking or metabolizing the meaning, the energy, the nutrients, so to speak, from those feelings. And so I have been sitting with that sense of how, like, being at the water's edge, because that's where I first got that idea about these bog bodies bubbling to the surface, but like being in nature, and that kind of tying back to one of the questions, having a place where you feel like you can be quiet without the distractions of the world, and kind of sit with yourself and your feelings, and make sense of the world, and use that love energy, as Joan pointed out. And I like that quotation too about grief and love are two sisters, that it really is our love for these things that is creating this intense sense of grief and pain.
Um, yeah, talking very generally, certainly very appreciative of the resources within the design school for working through grief and those sorts of things, and grateful for the people here tonight sharing their vulnerable stories and being willing to open up. And I think that helps, everyone else kind of um, give a sense that you're not alone. And that's a very courageous thing to do, is to share those sorts of stories. So I just wanted to express my gratitude for that. Um, yeah, a little bit from my end, and I do thought, well, I don't know how new it is, but I thought that to come up, tying some things together is growing up, the message from society and the culture was for males is, individualism. Just hurt yourself, just rub some dirt on it, you'll be fine. So, I mean, you build up capacities, growing up under, with those sorts of things, but then certainly lack capacities in other ways. So for me personally, I think part of my journey is learning to ask for help, and people can be there for you, but you got to tell them. They can't read your mind or anything. So uh, seeing the example of people showing their vulnerability and showing their stories is helpful for me to feel okay to share mine, and I know that people will be there for me um, in some way, as they can. We all just do the best that we can with what we have. Um, yeah, I think that's what I feel I want to share at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
Karen, can you say that one more time about the bodies resurfacing?
Yeah. So bog bodies are this phenomenon of like I think they were either human sacrifice or murder victims or something, but like they've encountered a few people digging up peat in bogs in Scotland and Denmark and whatnot have encountered these corpses that are
Not
that
people.
they're pickled. What chemically they've been pickled because of the acid in the anaerobic conditions in the bog didn't let bacteria break down the way it would break down if it were in a soil conditions, for example. And so I was like, wow, that's cool. You know, that bog bodies are a thing, and and just the symbolism of and as you know, Dave has already referenced, like we've been told, you know, don't cry, push your feelings down, you know,
Just get over it.
just get over it, rub some dirt on it, as Dave said, and that sense of, you know, just keep pushing things down. I imagine there were like all these, but we have these kind of personal traumas, but then we also have the collective grieving and trauma about overshoot, and you know that a lot of people are dying and will die, and all these species, the orangutans and koalas, and you know
The Amazon.
the Amazon. Yeah, you know there's plenty of stuff to be grieved that we just don't even have like you know a handle on it. And so I was thinking that the bog witch as a storytelling character is giving people a space to like notice, like, oh gosh, these things are bubbling to the surface. They you know, they maybe nothing happened when I just kept pushing them down and I thought maybe they'd break down or something, but I have to deal with this stuff that's bubbling to the surface. And so I've tried to, in one of the chapters that one of the stories that I was working on, I was talking about like walking by the eye of the bog and hear these bodies bobbing at the surface and thinking like, oh, I'm gonna have to do something about that. You know, like, uh, like some mornings I wake up and they'll be like, if I see cat vomit on the floor, it's like I have to clean. I can't like, you know, once you know it's there, you have to do something about it. You can't just like, oh, I'm gonna keep pushing that. I mean, I guess I could, but
An
kind of
option. It's not a good one.
there are options. There are options. But that sense of like, once you see it, then like, okay, now I see it and I should do something about it. And so that's kind of where I was trying to go with the bog bodies, that there's this sense of something emerging that that I can't just keep pushing down, that I and maybe I'm in a safe enough place that I can unpack my feelings about that thing and start to turn it into an energy that can be useful or survivable. And I saw Bryce had his hand up, but he put your hand back down.
I was just going to mention that bog bacon that I was telling you about that one time. The Irish used to go and bury some meat in the bog and to preserve it. And the English banned the practice. They made it illegal. Obviously, the English had queasy stomachs,
Oh my
and the
God.
Irish used to, preserve meat by storing it in an acidic bog.
Wow, because I just learned about bog cheese and
Yeah, I
Right.
think I mentioned that to you. But
bog
yeah,
butter. Yeah.
yeah,
So
bog butter,
like
bog cheese.
dairy products, these are our ancestors. I mean, in Wisconsin, we are such a cheese and meat oriented culture.
And we have bogs too.
And we have bogs too. Maybe there's a
So,
cache of cheese.
question is muskeg, is that bog?
That is,
Do you
I
know?
think that is a kind of
It
I'm
is
not,
Because
yeah,
that's
Bryce.
more of a far
heavy on
north
sphagnum
Canada
moss.
thing. But I think that entire animals are found in muskeg
Hmm.
Yeah,
when,
yeah.
in areas when permafrost thaws, and there's all kinds of different examples of, yeah, that to draw from all different cultures, I think, of this bog, which bodies
It looks like it's a
floating to the
specific.
surface or emerging from the muskeg, or yeah.
Yeah. Well, and now I'm wondering, like we have the town just a little bit southwest of here is Muskego.
Mhm.
Um,
Must be same route. Yeah.
and Beulah Bog isn't far from Muskego. Because this is saying it's related to Cree. Like this may be like an indigenous, well, I suppose bog was maybe indigenous to Scotland or wherever. But somebody came up with a word with those words, but muskeg maybe is more to this part of the
Yeah,
world.
it seems to me Pete Jeff uses a different word again for bog. I can't, it doesn't, I can't think of it right now, but I think he, because he did a whole thing talking about PEAT, it seems to
Doesn't
me.
call it a fen, does he? He doesn't say
Uh,
fen, does he? F-E-N?
no, I'll have to look back to see.
Okay. Because fens are usually
Yeah.
calcium rich.
There's some perched fen in my watershed, not too far from me,
I
where
have
it's elevated,
calcium rich
elevated.
fens right along the Lake Michigan bluffs, about a half a mile to a mile east of me. They're like from Warnemont Park down through Grant Park, where the water seepages come out of the bluffs, and the plant species that grow there are unlike what grows elsewhere.
Yeah, it's that same uh, description for the perched fen area near. It's between Paris and Brantford along the Grand River. Yeah,
Cool.
there's some
Cool.
pretty interesting formations
And it looks like
and unique vegetation too. Yeah.
very cool. And it looks like we lost Boubacar, but it is 1 in the morning where,
Yeah, it
he
was
is.
kind of late. That
Wow.
was great to have him
Yeah,
join.
great. I was thinking about, having book club at a different, I don't know. We did our best
We've
with trying
tried, yeah,
to
we've tried
use.
different times.
I
I
think
think the
Dave and I
recordings
were
is
like,
really the
we'll
only.
do it at like 8 in the morning, in the afternoon, in the evening, and see what gets the most votes. And here we are. So, one last chapter we'll talk about tonight, chapter 12, gets into a network of regenerative bioregions, and that's, certainly. Bryce and I were just talking about that on the radio show a couple days ago, and
I watched that podcast just the other day. That's really, I having been in conversation with you, I felt it was really great to hear both of you in conversation.
I really enjoy, yeah, being in conversation like that for I think I'm going to host my own show because I've been subbing, and April that ends up this week. This will be my last show
Oh,
this Thursday
okay.
for the program that I've been subbing for, but they have an open slot, so I might
Excellent. That's really exciting.
throw myself into being a full-time host. Well, I mean, one half hour a week
Having a
full-time
regular
host,
show, yeah, that's
but
not
having
just
a
guesting on someone else's. Yeah, that's
yeah, because it's been,
congratulations.
thank you, yeah. Which to kind of tie it back to this chapter, like I feel is a way to do the networking, this bioregional networking, and earlier today, like I said, a couple of us are hosting or are preparing to host regional place-based hubs in the design school, and trying to figure out, how is this tool working, is this effective for people finding us, and I'm feeling hopeful that like I found, Bruce found us, or excuse me, Bryce
Right.
found us, and being able to have some sort of fixed point in all of this stuff moving around, of being able to be like, well, if I can find that place-based hub, I can find those conversations or those a knowledge base, a bunch of being able to share files and resources and maps and really co-creating the knowledge base for a digital bioregional learning center or ecosystem. But this chapter in particular talks about we're halfway through the book, the first nine major ideas that he's laying out in the argument, and then where we get in the second half of the book is really what we're trying to do in the design school, right? He wrote this book as the design school was emerging from kind of a writing group that was workshopping this book and coming up with like, well, what would be the design pathway? What would we have to do? And I've heard Joe talk about like writing on the back of a napkin or something like, well, it would have to be this and it would have to be that, and that kind of evolving into a pathway, a design pathway. And so the three questions here to wrap up chapter 12: where does your water come from, and have you ever visited its source? And a couple of you know that I'm like tromping around finding my birth bog, looking for the headwaters of the Oconomowoc River, because in a couple weeks I'm going to be Bryce and I are going to be hosting Joe and Penny and talking about the upper reaches of the Mississippi watershed, and so it's really causing me to ask these kinds of questions. And talking with Dylan about like the city of Chicago, his watershed, according to those maps that we've been playing with, is this sanitation and shipping channel, like that was carved to drain to the Mississippi. It was a reversal of the Chicago River, essentially, and how that's like a big psychological wound, or, like how do you feel in touch with your bioregion if it's this synthetic thing that is, completely not about being connected to Lake Michigan, which of course Chicago is. So anyway, I guess I'm answering question one there. Number two, what does it mean to live in a regenerative economy, and how can you organize your personal life so that it is more aligned with this way of being? And I know Dave will maybe have some things to say about that with like the co-op work and the stuff in Dayton. And the third one, how did you feel reading the story, this kind of futuristic story of like in 2100, we will have arrived at this point. How did you feel reading that story I told about the future of humanity? Did it feel realistic to you? If it turns out to be true, how would you want to be an active participant in shaping how that story unfolds?
I guess I'll take a whack at question two a little bit here. Um, for yeah, that's what does it mean to live in a regenerative economy? How can you organize your personal life so it's more aligned with this way of being? So yeah, all sorts of things that come up for me there, but one, um, aligning your life. So I think of that as like another way of looking at that might be like, how do you extract yourself from like the current economy, social structure, all that sort of thing. So one example for our family that we've decided to do is my wife and I decided to homeschool our children. So now that's one small aspect of like the whole thing. And that's maybe only partial of, extracting ourselves from the current education system, which, although there are certainly bright spots within it. And I always want to reiterate, anything I say is not about the people within the system. It's um, the system itself. Yeah, it seems to be working great at producing facilities and people that for a world that existed, many years ago, but not for the world that exists today. But then you find out, hey, we're doing great extracting ourselves from this, but then, everything's tied together. So you start thinking about How do I get myself out of the food system? You go to the grocery store and all the crap that's on the shelves in there, and it's not healthy for you. And then that's tied to, of course, the soil that the food grows in and how that's being depleted over time, and then the water, just so the health system, healthcare, food, education, and then you could list, another, 8 to 10 things as well. And you find that you try and get out of this, um, but you can't fully get out of it because then you have to adjust other things in other areas. Yeah. I'll have to go through and like kind of make a list of like how all that's, at least how I see it, how it's all connected together. I'm sure other people have done it too, but just for my own exercise. But yeah, let me stop there.
Okay, I'm gonna go and I'll try to make it quick. Uh, when I was a kid, our water came from right outside the back door. We had a nice pump house out there with a well that went straight down into the aquifer. We were in the old town of Lake on the far south side of Milwaukee, and the neighborhood, pretty much the city stopped at the end of the block. And there was a nice marsh down there, swamp, maybe a bog, maybe, but I'm not sure. And after that was some farm fields and such. Well, all of that changed as I grew up, and it's all city now, all the way down to the county line down there. And but in Milwaukee, it came from a intake out in Lake Michigan. Same thing where we lived in Cudahy, and I'm in South Milwaukee now, and there's an intake pipe about a couple hundred yards out there, and that's where water comes from, Lake Michigan. And question two, what does it mean to live in a regenerative economy, and how can you organize your personal life so it's more aligned with the way of being? Well, we do belong to a food co-op, which I rarely go to because, frankly, I find it too expensive, and I can usually get the food cheaper right out of my own yard. Um, I've organized my personal life to align with that sort of thinking by recognizing that it's really unrealistic to try to grow things that are really cheap at the store, like sweet corn, tomatoes, stuff like that. Instead, the things I grow the things that do well here, whether it be a weed, whether it be self-sowing annuals and biennials, or whether it be tree crops that I can't get at the store. So I can't grow pears because they all die of fire blight. Apples are iffy for me too for the same reason. But I can grow pawpaws and persimmons like crazy, and I can't get those at the store. So I've adapted to grow and use what I can get. And it doesn't make sense to grow spinach because it bolts so quickly when I can get 5+ crops of bishop's weed every year. And in Italy, it's used exactly like spinach. So I simply pick bishop's weed, steam it, freeze it, vacuum seal it, and I've got my spinach for the whole year. So I've been adapting in place to go and do those sorts of things. And then services and goods that I share with others, and then they share with me. And I'm at a point in my life now where I realize I have too much stuff. So every time my children come, I send them away with some of it. And other stuff I give to friends, and I say, "Hey, I don't need this. I've, I'm done with this for now. You want it?" And if they want it, fine. Otherwise, it could end up going to a secondhand store. But that's regenerative economy. I go to Goodwill and Salvation Army a lot, and I look for things that are useful to me, and that's keeping them out of the waste stream. So that's again a part of it, and that's providing a service, and that is um, giving employment to people who may be challenged or otherwise disadvantaged, and at the same time keeping things out of the waste stream. That's it.
Thank you.
So I think I mentioned we are very reliant on groundwater here in my watershed. And so the one of the two municipal wells is just slightly to the north of me. And our water is very hard as a result. There's a lot of gypsum in the area. And in fact, the town of Paris kind of emerged as a result of gypsum mines. along the Grand River. Um, and so the interesting trivia, so my maiden name is Telfer, and the well is called the Telfer Well because it's on land that was my ancestors' land. Um, Anyways, so it's not very far away. It's really great water. It's under stress because of the ridiculous amount of development that's happening here, and it's affecting the water quality. Our water is becoming noticeably harder. We also have gravel extraction they're doing under water table extraction, and that's depleting the aquifer as well. So enough about that water bit. Now, what else? The regenerative economy. So when my kids were younger, my mom was very generous and bought all kinds of clothes for my kids. And at one point, we had lots and lots of things, and we thought, oh, we'll have a yard sale. And oh my Lord, what a horrifying experience. Like I carefully priced things, and then, something would be 25 cents and people would want to offer me a dime or 5 cents. And I just thought I was going to lose my mind. So after that, I decided I would really just spend my time to find someone who could, well, and then I tried doing it at a consignment shop and got next to nothing out of that. So I ended up, actively looking for people to just make use of the clothes directly instead of trying to sell them or whatever. But there was that, and I've actually taken some hand now that my children are not, they're much taller than me now. I sometimes use some of their hand-me-downs instead of the other way around, and giving them to others. And so there's that. This is a very rural place, so it's quite easy to find farm markets. So we almost never go to the grocery store to shop, and I feel blessed that is the situation. So everything from milk to vegetables and meat, everything it's farm to table pretty much. And we have our own vegetable garden. It's relatively poor soil, so we are working on improving the quality. So we do composting. Haven't really gotten into biochar yet, but that's something I'm interested in. And I do a tremendous amount of work on a volunteer basis, and so I look forward to trying to find ways to be able to be sustainable, because it's, people say, oh, we need to get paid for doing this kind of work where we're collaborating and weaving and making connections with people and building up, knowledge commons and that kind of thing. But yeah, I'll be darned if I know how to get paid for it. So I look forward to learning about that within the design school strategies to make my life a little bit more sustainable, because it isn't really. Yeah, so that's me.
If you heat with wood, you can sift out the charcoal bits that are left, any unburned stuff, and then that becomes
Just
the
use
charcoal
that.
that you can then throw in your compost heap and then activate it with the compost.
We don't have a wood heat, but we do have where we burn material, because there's just so much dead wood in our area. So we have a fire pit that we can harvest
Yeah,
the ash from,
I'm
for
trying to
sure.
figure out how to turn our fire pit into more of a biochar furnace, like create a low oxygen environment where, because we have yard waste that trimmings and twigs and branches and stuff that could probably do something with, but I haven't figured it out.
Karen, I'll give you the files. I have them.
Thank you, Bryce.
In fact, I'm gonna take a look here. I'm sure I have an empty thumb drive, and I'm gonna load it up with all the stuff on degrowth and bioregionalism and now biochar as well.
Awesome.
Excellent.
Awesome.
I'm gonna look for that in your hub, Karen,
Oh yeah. Well, I mean,
if
we
possible.
can share
Yeah.
that in the Great Lake Michigan hub too. That would be
Right.
that kind
Yeah.
of knowledge base
Yeah.
information. Um, and Bryce is so generous. He's opening his home this weekend. We're going to have a group of us come over and um, learn about the pawpaws and persimmons and bishops.
Ah, that's what I'm so jealous of the pawpaws. I've been coveting some pawpaw trees myself. Yeah, I haven't
Maybe when
laid
you
my
make
hands
your
on
way
them
on
yet.
this side of the pond, Joan, we'll head over to Bryce's house
I
and
have pawpaw seedlings that have been coming up in my garden because when I'm done processing the stuff, rather than cart it all the way to the back of the property and throw it in the compost heap, I just chuck it all in the garden. Well, over the last 2 years now, I've been having these seedlings coming up, and I keep pulling the darn things out, so I'm having trouble giving them all away.
may
So I'm
I
sure there'll be more seedlings.
I'll take some off your hands if you're
If there's any coming up, you're welcome to go home with them. Seriously, I have
Excellent.
plenty of empty pots as well. I never throw anything away,
fantastic.
except for the 2 vacuum cleaners that I have
The
to throw out
problem
now that are
is the
both shot.
solution.
Oh, hey, I'll take the 2 vacuum cleaners because my stepmom is a scrapologist and she
Oh, good.
deconstructs and she sells the metal to the scrapper.
Okay, good. Yeah, because it's the plastic lid components for the canister, and as luck would have it, that's the one part that Eureka does not give you a replacement for online.
Planned obsolescence.
Yes, and I have two of those. I've just been swapping out the good one between vacuum cleaners, got one on each floor, and now it's like, okay, got to use the shop vac, which I prefer anyway.
Well, I'm looking at the time and an hour has whooshed by again. And
Yeah.
thank you all for coming tonight and for sharing your reflections on these 3 chapters. We'll read 3 more next week. And maybe you'll see Bryce and I in the same square because we'll be at the library down the street here. I made the reservation, Bryce, so we
Okay,
should
saw that.
all set for next Monday. All right. Well, thanks everyone. Have a terrific week, and we'll see you soon.
Bye for
Bye-bye.
now. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.